Welcome, guys. Welcome, everyone. This is my first time ever doing a live feed, so I'm pretty new to all this. This is kind of a test run, but this is going to be just a general Q&A. I'm working with Willow and Stone, co-hosting, so they're going to be on here in a minute too. And the focus of this first feed is, first of all, working out the kinks, getting used to this for me, but also to make it focused on addiction. So we're going to do all different kinds of themes that we'll explore in mental health. So it'll be, addiction and the neuroscience of addiction, the neuroscience of mindfulness and different kinds of mindfulness techniques you can do, somatic therapy techniques, basically things you can do with your body to help calm your nervous system, sound therapy techniques, aromatherapy techniques, really anything you guys are interested in talking about. I'm very open to. I have a background in a few different areas. I've worked in addiction medicine for several years, in residential settings and in outpatient settings. And I've also worked in psychiatric residential care and private practice, and I have experienced a lot of different populations and seen a lot of things, worked with a lot of different clientele, and then I've got my own life experience relevant to this stuff too, which I talk a little bit about on my bio, but I also have a bipolar diagnosis that is a big reason why I have passion to explore mental health in all these different ways. I also posted a video right before this with my drum back here. This is my djembe that I've had for many years. I've also played drums since I was a kid, and drums are very meaningful to me. And as you can see in my background, it's very nature themed. You've seen this background if you've seen some of my videos with the tapestry of Yosemite. And then on the left side, these are just some things that are important to me for the Zen of it. So plant therapy, I'm a big believer in, so I've got a couple plants back there. I've got my Buddha Siddhartha head keeping me company. This is a diffuser. It looks kind of like a fireplace, but it's actually a aromatherapy diffuser. And I've got just a picture of a tiger back there because I'm big into nature therapy and animal therapy, and I've always connected with tigers. And then up there, I've got a couple of paintings that I've made. I do different, random artwork. Wouldn't call myself an artist necessarily, like some kind of sophisticated artist. I just like to do kind of free form art. So that's what that is. But yeah, just trying to introduce myself, and I'll be collaborating with Willow and Stone. We have a moderator who will be working with us. Her name is Elsa, and she's awesome. And she's going to be throwing out some questions in the chat now that I'm done introducing myself, and you guys can ask whatever you'd like. So I've got the screen tilted so you can see me properly. So I'm reading the comments sideways. So she said, what are some reasons people are getting addicted to things? Well, the neuroscience of it is complex but simple at the same time. So we all have a reward system that guides and influences our decisions. And the reward system is based on survival. It's based on doing our best to sift and sort through life and keep ourselves protected, secure, nourished, and surviving. And so that mechanism with our nervous system and the fight, flight, freeze, and I know some of you guys have heard of that. I had a video about it too, but it's a pretty common thing that a lot of people have heard of. The fight, flight, freeze nervous system gets hijacked. So its initial purpose is to try and assess for threats, make sure that we're kept safe and protected, make sure that we know how to find food. So it's feeding off of our physiological adrenal glands, adrenal system, cortisol, for all these purposes. And throughout most of our history, those purposes were extremely helpful, and it was easy to navigate fluidly as far as our nervous system detecting threats, and when things were actual threats or perceived threats. But here in modern times, it's much harder for the nervous system to do that because there are so many things that flare up our anxiety. And so it makes us very susceptible to our nervous system being overworked and getting hijacked. And how this relates to addiction is that addiction is feeding off of that same reward system. So when you start using a substance, especially if you've been through trauma, because if you've been through trauma, then you already have a reward system or a threshold for pleasure that's higher than other people's, because your nervous system has been more focused on survival and safety, and therefore you've been developing a nervous system that's more protected and guarded and sort of assessing for threats rather than being as open. So because of that, if you've been through trauma, you already have kind of a deficit. Not necessarily this generalization, so maybe if you have been through trauma, you might not, but generally speaking, it's difficult to experience high degrees of pleasure when you've been through trauma. And so substances can allow you to get past that threshold. And because of that, just like anything, when your brain finds something that's giving it enough reward and reason to continue doing that thing, and that's measured through chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, and that's going to cause wiring or rooting towards that particular thing, and it gets reinforced by your brain. Not by your thinking brain, but by your subconscious reactive fight, flight, freeze survival brain. And so that causes a super strong rooting system to go towards the substance of choice. And then you can get hijacked to where it's using that same mechanism of that fight, flight, freeze to get you to keep using the substance, because it's recognizing it as important for survival, because it's giving you feel-good chemicals disproportionately to other things in your life. So that's why people who have addictions often they find little interest or pleasure in doing other things. You'll see those on different mental health questionnaires. That's why. So it's really hard to reverse that process, but thankfully our brains are really plastic and can easily change. Not easily change, sorry, can change with habits over a long period of time. But that does give hope for people who do have addictions. It's not just that that rooting or that wiring lasts forever. You can still adapt and use different habits, different techniques to help loosen up that wiring. And then over time, your brain can continue to heal and that threshold can continue to come down, and you can start experiencing pleasure more on everyday things. That's the long answer, but there's also a lot more that goes into it. So it's also kind of an abridged answer. If someone is a shopaholic, is it likely that person, sorry, let's scroll down. Is it likely that person went through trauma? In this case, just focusing on that mechanism of addiction, all of us, for the most part, not everybody, but most of us have some kind of addiction to something, even if it's like sugar. It doesn't necessarily have to be these super problematic things, although sugar can obviously lead to all kinds of medical, health issues. But a lot of us are drawn to certain things that interest us, and they can become addicting if we then continue going back to that same well over and over and over again, and we don't diversify the activities that we do. Then our brain is going to be convinced that, okay, this is the way that I experience pleasure, or this is the way that I experience relief, like retail therapy. So shopping is one of those things that's more easily accessible for a lot of people, and it's also not stigmatized the same way. A lot of people might not have substances promoted in their families, so that seems like more of a safe thing. when in reality, it's just feeding into the same system. And if you have been through trauma, you're more likely to develop an addiction to any of these things. So yeah, if you've been through trauma, same thing with shopping. If that's a system that your brain is recognizing is giving you relief, it's giving you some level of enjoyment, and that's just something that's difficult to experience in your life, then it's going to continue to root towards shopping. And it's going to get you to keep shopping as much as it can. Your reactive brain's going to get your thinking brain to continue to push that envelope, continue to shop, and continue to go back to that well, because that's the well. That's where the nourishment, the water's found in the desert. Let's see. Okay. Next question. I'm going to scroll down. If you guys want to ask questions too, you're welcome to. We have our moderator, Elsa from Willow and Stone, asking questions in the chat. What are the most common types of addiction cases in your practice? So I recently got into full-time private practice, and I had been working primarily in addiction rehab settings for the past close to 5 years, 4 to 5 years. And some of the most common cases that you'd see, of course, are you see alcohol quite often. Again, same thing with substances, like, what's permitted and what's not in the family construct. And alcohol is one of those things that's, for whatever reason, glorified to the extent that, most cultures, family, setups, alcohol can be present, and it's not an issue in and of itself. And so alcohol is kind of an easy permission slip to get into substance use, and because a lot of times it is glorified on TV and in advertisements and movies and everything else. So it's often synonymous with things like watching sports. A lot of times it's kind of synonymous with, or different kinds of celebrations and holidays and stuff. So alcohol is super debilitating, of course, as an addiction, and it's like poison. Of course, in moderation, most people would be fine, but we're talking about addiction here, and it causes all kinds of health problems. It can cause cognition problems over the years, and I've worked with clients who have been in and out of rehabs, and then when they're in their 50s and 60s, they call it wet brain, which is not a very clinical term, but just this notion that your cognition can take a big hit, like your ability to remember things. It can speed up like dementia and stuff like that, neurocognitive issues. Of course, there's lots of physical issues like cirrhosis of the liver and all the kinds of ways that alcohol damages your body. But alcohol is for sure the most common. Second most common is probably opiates, like fentanyl mostly, and then heroin to a certain extent, but I'd say fentanyl, and also in some cases pain pills, like oxycodone for instance, but fentanyl is a whole nother huge topic, because fentanyl is a big issue in the country, as many of you probably know. And maybe you know someone who got addicted to fentanyl or who's using fentanyl. If you're using fentanyl, you're probably not far off from getting addicted to it, because its potency is equivalent of roughly 100 times that of heroin. So if you've been using fentanyl, or you know someone who's using fentanyl, it's likely that they're going to develop an addiction, because from that neurological wiring reward system process, it's just flooding it with feel-good chemicals, and then that's your brain associating that with survival. It's like if you were wandering through a desert and you found a well. It's that level of contrast for your mind. So your mind is just like, I need that. That's something I need to have. So the potency levels are in a lot of substances. That's another conversation about certain substances that are natural also have really unnatural potency levels, and that's what causes the addiction. Let's keep scrolling. how quickly people get addicted to alcohol, or how quickly do people get addicted to alcohol, and what's the most common alcoholic drink? That's funny. I don't know the answer to the second one. I would guess beer, I don't really know, but if I would guess, because in a lot of other countries, beer's popular in many places around the world. So I would guess. As far as an addiction, a lot of people I've seen would start off, who said they started off drinking beers or wine or whatever, and then they move to liquor most of the time, because liquor is just, again, higher potency levels. It's more concentrated. So you build a tolerance with substance use, and therefore you need more of it to receive the same effect. And most of the time people are going into heavy liquor. Usually it's heavy drinking with liquor. Usually it's vodka, because vodka is the most affordable. You can usually buy, fifths of vodka, certain brands, for pretty cheap. So a lot of time it ends up being vodka. And as far as how addiction works, people getting addicted, that's complicated, because some people can drink heavily and not develop an addiction, and somebody else can. So really there's an individuality to this that's extremely important, and because the complexities of our nervous systems and how we adapt ever since we're young, that affects our disposition and vulnerability to addiction. It even goes intergenerationally. If your father or grandfather or great-grandfather or mother, same thing, if they had addictions, if they've been through trauma, to some degree that's intergenerational, and that can get stored in your body. So you already have a disposition towards developing an addiction before you were even born in some cases. And there's a harsh reality to that a lot of people don't know. And when I first found that out, I was pretty shocked. But that's the truth. So you're already kind of like fighting uphill if you've got addiction in your family, if you have a history of trauma in your family. Your nervous system's more likely to become dysregulated and maladaptive. So as you get older, your nervous system is swimming through life as best as it can, along with you, and your reactive, survival ancient brain with your thinking brain. And everyone's trying to live, through life and navigate it in a way that's fluid. And our nervous systems are typically really good at that. But most of our history, we haven't had to deal with a lot of the stuff we deal with now. So we're all kind of fish out of water in 2026, trying to figure out how to navigate things where we don't develop addictions. Because there's a lot of things out there that are trying to get us addicted. Everything on the internet, for the most part, its goal, especially social media and media outlets, if you don't know how to use them in moderation, like anything else, it's feeding into that same neurological wiring, and that's why they call it death scrolling. So I don't want to talk poorly about this app, but it's something to be aware of, that it's using those same mechanisms. So just to be aware of anything where you feel like a lot of your attention's being sucked into it, and understand that you want to diversify the things that interest you, and make sure that you're keeping up with that, because especially if you have a history of trauma or abuse and things like that, you're likely to be more susceptible to developing an addiction. And the addictions are not permanent in the sense that you can rewire your brain, but it's good stuff to be aware of. What are some of the worst cases of people who are addicted to social media? I don't know a lot of, it's a good questions. I don't know a lot of the, big cases as much, but there's a movie or a documentary some of you guys have maybe seen on Netflix, and I have no association with them at all. I'm not getting any kickbacks, no commission. It's just a video that I like on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. And it came out, like 5 or 6 years ago, something like that, maybe less. And it's all about people for various social media platforms who resigned, who were high up executives, like for Facebook, Google, etc. And they were whistleblowers, basically, saying, hey, this is how the algorithm works, just be aware of it. And not to say social media doesn't have amazing potential, and obviously we know this can be used for so many wonderful things. And that was its original intention by what a lot of the creators had said. But at the end of the day, our attention is a commodity. And a lot of the movie talks about that. So just know that your attention has a cost. I had a little, saying out on one of my posts, like, you pay for your attention. You have to look at your attention as a commodity. And it is. That's why a lot of things are free, because your attention is the commodity. So just to be aware that you want to diversify your interests, make sure you're tending to your well-being and your self-care and all of that, and you're never relying on any particular outlet for the majority of your enjoyment or contentment or numbing or whatever it is. Really honor your interests and your passions, the things that excite you. And we'll talk more about coping skills and daily habits and things, I'm sure, but that's what's going to help make sure that you don't become too reliant on anything, including social media. Do you speak with teens? What are the most common challenges? I work with teenagers a little bit. I'm not, definitely wouldn't consider myself an expert working with teens, because a lot of times I worked in residential settings, like adult residential settings or outpatient, and it wasn't as much with youth. But I have worked with some at-risk youth before. I've worked in juvenile detention settings, running groups and things, so I have some experience with youth. And then I've had clients too, that are fit that category. And common challenges, I feel like it's really difficult to be a kid right now. I have a 2-year-old daughter. You may hear her crying in the background here or there. So she's not at this point yet where she's, living in this environment that's very volatile right now. But a lot of kids are trying to, they're kind of guinea pigs, a lot of things that are going on, especially after COVID. I have friends who are teachers, high school teachers, elementary school teachers, and a lot of kids are doing their best, but the educational system isn't exactly foolproof, and it got exposed through COVID, all the problems with it, just because more kids are at home, and then the thing that they're trying to learn off of is also the thing that they play games on. And that didn't work out very well for a lot of families. I thankfully didn't have to deal with that yet. But yeah, I've heard from teachers over the years saying kids are getting more and more almost like in the clouds, fantastical about what they want and less realistic. And that's its own conversation. But I would hear things like a lot more teenagers are wanting to become social media influencers, and then that becomes one of their primary goals in life, and not as much to become a teacher or a doctor or a scientist or a lawyer or a writer or a poet or whatever. And so a lot of the energy goes towards social media influencer, which speaks to this topic of addiction, because the nervous systems, the reward centers, the adaptability, the neuro vulnerability is all more raw and less able to be controlled, and it's less perceptive when you're younger. And so you are more susceptible to these addiction loops roping you into things, especially social media and substances. when your brain's in the developmental years, which usually statistically happens until you're right around your mid-20s. So if you're younger, there's actually some very staggering statistics about the inception of social media in the early 2010s and how much that's affected depression and anxiety. And those statistics have been gathered now for the last decade and a half. And reported depression and anxiety symptoms have spiked dramatically, particularly for teenage women, but really across the board. Yeah, I can add more to that, but I'm not an expert working with youth, but I would say that those are some of the more common challenges, like navigating 2026. We've seen what's going on in the world right now. And then one thing that I feel is a good way to capture this with the depression and anxiety is, when a lot of us were kids, we only had so many people in our class, and those are the people we're comparing ourselves to, and those are the people who have the potential for bullying us. So maybe it's 10, 20, 30, 40, however big your school was. Usually elementary classes aren't that big. But then if you take that number and you times it by 1,000, because now you're being, or a million or whatever, because now you're being compared to everybody you're looking at online. And now you're being bullied by all the people that could be bullying you online. Then now your risk-reward ratio is heavily tilted towards risk. And so now a lot more kids are being bullied, cyberbullied, and being made to feel less than. Seeing people glorified, 18, 19-year-olds who are influencers with all this money and living this lavish life, which we know has its own, lipstick on it that's not total reality. It's all supposed to be looking as good as possible to get more likes and follows and all of that. So there's a lot of fakeness also. And then you throw in AI. That's a whole other curveball. So there's so many challenges that teens are going to be facing. I don't envy them. I don't envy the situation. It's rough. And if you don't have discernment, if you've just grown up with technology, you've just grown up with the internet and social media and the way the world's functioning, you're not going to have the same discernment unless your parents are teaching you it, or you're really being taught in school. And I know there are some schools that have adapted and have caught up with the times and done a better job of helping their students through those things. But a lot of schools haven't. And a lot of teenagers are losing their sense of selves. Losing their sense of self, I should say. Losing their individuality. Because you're getting grouped into so many other people. So therefore your sense of self kind of gets lost. And you forget that your voice is just as valuable as anyone else's. And you're following people. And you're vying for attention. And then that attention is being vied for in ways that for many kids are vain and not really, philosophical or existential or artistic or creative. A lot of times it's things that are superficial. So it's glorifying things that are more biological and not as much conscious or self-aware or creative, imaginative. So the wrong things are being glorified too. And that gives a distorted perception of reality and what's most important. I'll stop there for now on that topic because I could keep going, but I'm going to scroll further down. Have you had a chance to study the brain of a person who is going through addiction? I wish. I would love to eventually have an EEG, which I think the pronunciation is electroencephalograph, which is that machine where you put a bunch of wires on somebody's head and it can measure their brain waves. And the actual type of therapy is called neurofeedback therapy. Neurofeedback is really cool. It's really cool. I want to get into it. At some point when I have a brick and mortar office, I will absolutely get an EEG and do neurofeedback therapy, and maybe sooner than that. But yeah, I mean, I've seen videos of it and people with EEGs and seeing how it affects brain waves and brainwave balances, and then MRIs. I've seen MRIs and like in certain videos. There's a video for those who are interested on YouTube. Again, I have no affiliation at all. I've just shown it to clients in many, many groups over the years, running groups in outpatient and residential, called The Neurobiology of Addiction in Olson 101 is the name of it on YouTube. The Neurobiology of Addiction, Olson 101. I think Olson's the name of the city where she filmed it, and it's by Dr. Nicole Labor. And she's I believe a psychiatrist, if I'm not mistaken by memory, but she does lectures often on that topic of addiction and how it affects the brain. And she'll show slides of like an MRI of a brain that's not addicted and one that is addicted, and it just shows that the parts of the brain that get lit up the most with certain stimuli. And so one person having a beer who doesn't have an addiction, it shows what's lighting up in their brain, and somebody else's, and say maybe it's more their thinking brain and certain pleasure centers, and then the other person that's more the back of their brain, their midbrain, their ancient brain, which has to do with survival, and that part of the brain is getting lit up more. So that is an explanation of how that rooting system works. So your roots are getting spread, your neurons, which actually look like roots. If you look under like a microscope, they look like roots. So think of your brain as a rooting system. And the neurons are just trying to find their way based on your actions and what you want to learn, where you want to grow, what's most important to you, what you value, what's going to help you survive. And your thinking brain is going to root too, but your reactive survival brain is going to really root. So that's why the MRIs can look very different for those two types of brains. I don't know if I can say more on that, but I really recommend that video for whoever's interested. It's about 20 minutes. That's why I'll give it to clients, show it to them, and then ask them to give it to their family members or friends who they want to better understand, because there's so much shame and guilt and judgment and ignorance and just naivete around the topic of addiction. So I ask clients to share that with their loved ones too. It's called the Neurobiology of Addiction by Dr. Nicole Labor. Yeah, it's a big topic, the neurobiology one, because otherwise you feel like why am I that person? I don't even recognize that person. Why did I do that? I feel like I was an alter ego. Well, you were a different person. We all have split personalities in a way. We have personalities that are dictated by our feelings of safety versus unsafety. So if you're feeling unsafe because your body's going through withdrawals, then you're not going to be the same personality. Your personality construct will be going through that funnel. So you can't expect yourself to have control of your faculties and be conscientious and aware if you're going through withdrawals or you're being driven by a substance. It's going to compromise you. You can't expect yourself to think through that. And you can't expect yourself to act in a moral, conscientious way. So a lot of times morality gets mixed into, my daughter or son or whoever stole money from me and did these things and never paid me back, or they keep spending all their money on booze, or whatever. I can't believe they keep doing that. And there's all these judgments towards them. And sometimes there's a lot of destructiveness that happens in families and relationships because of substance use. So you can't ignore the reality of things either. You have to accept the reality of things, but the neurobiological factors are what they are. Just like if somebody had some kind of psychiatric condition that distorted their reality to the point where you can clearly see, okay, they're not themselves. And, being bipolar, I understand that idea. It's the same idea. So having, compassion, empathy, it's easier when you're not in it. But ideally we can get to that point where the stigmas can be broken and we can give people with addictions a break and help them get the type of support and information that they need as much as we can, and be patient with that process. But it's hard. Gambling addictions, your spouse loses all your money at the casino or in investments. It's hard to come back from that. So there's also the reality of what addictions do to family units and relationships and kids. You can't ignore the fallout either. How often does one with alcohol addiction need a therapy session, let's say? I would say that with addiction, I would suggest that you get creative. Like if you have an addiction, first of all, that's okay. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with it. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you've got faulty wiring. It just means that you want to diversify your approach and how you receive pleasure in life. And also in some cases go to rehab, because sometimes withdrawal and there can actually be health risks in that. You can have seizures and many other things can happen through the withdrawal process. So if you do have a addiction that's gone untreated for many years, you might need to go through a detox process in a rehab treatment center. You can contact your insurance to see what's available there. But if you have it in more, under control, only in the sense of that it's not hijacking your life as much, and therefore the withdrawal symptoms maybe aren't as bad. Getting creative. There are anti-craving medications, so you could always talk to your doctor about that. However, those do have, of course, their own side effects, like most medications. So just things to be aware of, but those can be helpful because those can help bridge the gap while your brain heals and the pleasure threshold gets reset. It can help bridge the gap chemically. So that can really help. But that's why I focus a lot on holistic wellness, because holistic wellness can help heal the brain, and it can help you get back in touch with your natural self, and it can help you re-engage with habits, hobbies, interests that maybe have been lost to time, or you get more connected to the natural world, and it's much easier to heal in various ways, whatever you're drawn to. But yeah, I would definitely recommend therapy too, of course, because addiction is debilitating in many cases and causes a lot of problems with the individual and their loved ones. So just holding space with a therapist like myself or others. Obviously I represent Willow and Stone. So I would encourage you to reach out to Willow and Stone Wellness Collective, and we have our links and things that we can provide you, and how to get in touch with various therapists, including myself. Elsa, who's running the Willow and Stone a TikTok page here, she can include links. This is our first time doing a live feed, so it'll become more organized as we go along. But I'm like a representative for the company in that sense. We have a number of therapists, I think 6 or 7 therapists who specialize in holistic wellness. And so I would definitely reach out, and you want to take a creative approach. And really part of it is like, okay, we have adversity in our lives, we get to those low points, but those low points, they represent an opportunity to try and change how we think about things, change our habits. Sometimes we need things to kind of crash a bit in order to understand that, oh, hey, I've been living in a way that's not authentic to who I am. This relationship was terrible before I started using substances. So, what do I do about the relationship? And so a lot of times the substances are getting you to a point where you've got to look in the mirror, and you can't ignore it. You have to see what's in front of it. And sometimes we need that. We need adversity in our lives to sort of wake us up sometimes to the things that we're doing and saying and thinking that aren't serving us. So yeah, for sure, reaching out to your therapists that you work with, or you can use us as well to get creative on addressing all the underlying reasons. But we specialize in holistic wellness, so things like nature therapy, sound therapy tools, aromatherapy tools, herbal teas, nutrition, and wellness, taking care of your mind and body and spirit for those who have that level of desire. Because of course we all have our own journeys, and there's nothing wrong with anyone's perspective, but that's something that could be available to you if you're interested, how you can integrate your spirituality, if that's something you align with. If not, that's fine. It doesn't have to be spiritual at all. I mean, it's all natural based. So it's however you define your relationship with the natural world and how you want to integrate that into your life. And you don't want to be separate from the natural world. We are part of it. We're not living here from another planet. This is our home. And we don't want to forget that we're just as connected as anything else. And so being able to reintegrate with nature is extremely important. I know I had a couple of videos recently about that, nature therapy. So I talk a lot about stuff like that. Obviously breath work, drums, music, right? Rhythms. Different things can put you in different states of conscious awareness. We have back here a diffuser. So there's a lot of pharmacological, medicinal, therapeutic benefits to different aromas. This is a company I really like for essential oils. I have no affiliation with them at all. This is my first time doing a live feed. This isn't pre-planned, but their company is Plant Therapy. You can find them on Amazon. I really like them a lot. Obviously every essential oil is not created equal, but this is a blend of 6 different essential oils for various things like relaxation, energy, rapid relief, stuff like that, immunity or immune aid. And if you want to check them out, you can. I highly recommend them. They have good quality products that are relatively affordable, and that's why I use them. So they're called Plant Therapy on Amazon, and I'm a huge believer in aromatherapy, which is another huge topic. But all the different sensory tools, right? Using our senses to try and stimulate us in holistic ways versus synthetic ways is a big part of the healing process. Can you talk more about somatic therapy? How can we support ourselves using what we have around us? Great question. Somatic therapy. So the word somatic is referring to body or body awareness. So somatic therapy is all about using your senses in coordination with grounding, in your nervous system, and various ways you can do that. So breath work is very somatic, right? So doing rhythmic breath work can be helpful for a lot of reasons. And practicing breath work can help not only with calming your nervous system down, but it can help pulling your attention to the present moment by following your breath. It can help with your lung capacity, expanding your lung capacity. And there's exercises you can do for that. Cleaning out stale air, taking deep breaths, retraining your body to breathe properly to begin with, things like that. Sound therapy is very somatic. So listening to certain tones and rhythms can induce states of relaxation. Things like binaural beats, which play different tones and frequencies that are mimicking brainwave states. It can help you through your hearing put yourself in almost like a hypnotic induced state of relaxation or alertness, depending on what the tone is. So you can use it in various ways, but that's highly somatic. Aromatherapy is, of course, very somatic. The nerves that are involved are your olfactory nerve in your nose, which is the quickest nervous system to your brain. And that's why, if you smell peppermint, it might make you think of a memory you had at Christmas or something, because it's very tied into our ancient brains, which are, if you're like a hunter-gatherer for most of our history, your sense of smell is pretty important for survival. And so memory and relationships with memories, emotional relationships with memories are really tied into our sense of smell. So that's highly somatic. But yeah, somatic therapy is wonderful. I use it every day. Here's a stone from a river close to where I live. I'm in Sacramento, from the American River. Just holding a stone can be somatic because you're feeling the coldness of it, the coolness of it, and you can admire the markings on it, right? The patterns. So your vision is obviously part of your somatic experiencing, and feeling something cold and solid like a stone is highly somatic. There's also a somatic term called interoception. INTROCEPTION, interoception, which just means body awareness, strengthening your body awareness. There's a meditation technique called body scan, which some of you who are into meditation have probably heard of. And it's like scanning your body up and down for any tension that's being stored in your body. And brings your attention. That's good for so many things, Meditation can be very somatic. But that particular technique is so good for interoception, for building your relationship with your body and the messages your body is sending you. So for instance, if your nervous system is getting activated or triggered, you'll experience things like sweaty palms, tightness in your shoulders or your chest or in your jaw. You'll be flushed. Obviously your heart will race, restlessness, all that kind of stuff. That's representative of this activated fight, flight, freeze state. So all these somatic skills can help recalibrate and rebalance your nervous system to go back into rest and digest, everything's okay mode. So that's a lot of what somatic therapy is centered around, is getting centered and not being sped up and compromised and going into your alter ego, which is really what your survival brain is. It's like a different ego. So if you look at yourself as like a different person when you're activated, that'll help you conceptualize the importance of using somatic tools before you see or do anything. Unless the things you're wanting to do involve survival, then you're just fine. But you're not meant to think through things when you're in those states. You know, it's not like you're getting attacked by a mountain lion. It's if you have an overdue bill in an email, your body might feel like it's getting attacked by a mountain lion. And so you have to have that awareness that hijacking is going on. So these somatic tools are so important to help you become more aware of the messages your body is sending you. So that's what interoception is, retraining yourself to recognize the messages your body is giving you. And the more you do that, the more self-aware you're going to be, the more empowered you're going to be to slow the snowball down before it gets bigger, before you go into full hijack mode. And if you mix in substances before you get into cravings and then withdrawals, and to the point where you have to have the substance. So this is very relevant for addiction medicine. Okay. What are your insights, what are your thoughts on Reiki and other energy healing practices? So I'm not an expert on Reiki. However, because I'm not a Reiki master, as they call them, or Reiki healer. I haven't done that particular certification. But I know a lot about what it is, and I've had Reiki performed on me, and I've tried experimenting with things around Reiki, which is all very sensory-based stuff, somatic stuff, sights and sounds and smells and all of that. Which I do all of that stuff. So I maybe unofficially pretty well trained in Reiki types of techniques, but Reiki is integrating healing tools from various cultures around the world. And there's parallels with different sounds and instruments all around the world. So our ancestors had figured some things out about how to use sound and smell and things like that to open up elements of our consciousness and our awareness. And of course, substances can do that too, but talking again holistically based is always going to be preferred as much as is possible. But yeah, it doesn't have to be. But in this case, we're talking about Reiki and holistically based practices with addiction. So this is the road we're going to take. So you want to do your best to learn about these things in general and how you relate to them. What's your relationship with, sound and smell and things like crystals, stones. And it really, a lot of things, the way I've heard it described to me is a lot of things are just permission slips. So you want to follow the things that you're interested in and honor that. And if Reiki is something that you're interested in, that's awesome. I highly encourage you to check it out if you're interested, because I would recommend it to those who are, because it's going to help create like a meditative healing experience for you, because it's integrating sounds and smells and various things that are representative of healing by frequency, by stimulation. So there are mechanisms, there are neural mechanisms. It's not just a bunch of, quasi-science. It's more scientific than a lot of people think. So, I would definitely check it out. And there's also usually like chimes and Tibetan bowls and crystal bowls and things like that are also highly hypnotic and induce certain states of consciousness which open you up to healing because sometimes you're activating parts of your brain that are locked up in your subconscious, and it's clearing space for those since your nervous system's getting out of the way. If you're in a hypnotic, deep, relaxed state, then you don't have as much getting in your way to really allow things to flow to the surface and get more in touch with your intuition. And that's as valuable as anything you can do, is getting in touch with your intuition. And a lot of our intuition's knowledge for us is severed by an overactive nervous system. And intuition can't speak to us real well through our nervous system activation. So that's where the interoception comes in. And then the energy work part of it, that's a whole nother topic that is a pretty complicated one, but I'm personally very open to all that stuff, and I do practice energy work in my own life, but that's like that's probably its own live feed to talk about that, because it's more controversial in that sense. There's a lot of layers to it that could be talked about, and you don't want to ever ostracize your audience or feel like they've got to do this or that, and or like force your ideals on other people, or like stuff like that. But energy work can be a confusing thing to talk about, and also for a lot of people to look into and understand. But I would be happy to do a live feed on energy work. It's a wonderful topic to talk about, and there's a lot more science to it. Especially as we're understanding more of the mechanisms, studying brain waves, EEGs, MRIs, getting to see how the brain and body react to various things. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot within the topic of energy work, and I'm very open to exploring it more. It's definitely one of my passions. How to identify a good therapist for a person who's going through addiction. I feel like it's the same as anything else, just to make sure you're being honest with yourself as far as, what are the things that I'm most interested in, what things am I aligned with, and what things am I not aligned with. And if you're someone who's aligned with holistic wellness and you see the value in that, then absolutely find a therapist that is specializing in that. And of course, we do specialize in that, so I got to put our own plug in there. But if you want a therapist who's more focused, that has 20 years of experience working in addiction medicine, there's nothing wrong with that too. And there's someone who's very into just the science of it, or somebody who's more focused on just communication and boundary setting and relapse prevention. It really depends on what you're interested in with your recovery. But I would say that from all the clients I've worked with over the years, the vast majority have found holistic wellness very inspiring and helpful, because it gives more opportunity for healing and growth and understanding and optimism than not having that. Because it's all about living in a more healthy way, more wellness. And if you're living a life of more wellness, then everything else will work itself out. So it's just finding your way to living more naturally in a more holistic way, where you're feeling at your best, you have more mental clarity, you're more in touch with your intuition, you're more aware of the things that interest you and the things that don't, you're more discerning, you're more perceptive, you're more likely to connect with people who are going to mirror your interests and uplift you, and not tolerate being around people who don't. So all those things are natural processes of holistic wellness. And so that ties right into addiction. So it's kind of like a byproduct in that sense. And I specialize in all these things. In my own story, and I've been in and out of psychiatric hospitals. I've had my issues with substances, so a lot of this is coming from my own life experience. I mean, the way that I've heard it, which has stuck with me all these years, is life experience is your best teacher. So look at your own life experiences in the things that you are interested in because of those life experiences. And that's the therapist you want to line up with. But you won't regret lining up with a holistic wellness therapist, just like you don't regret going on a nature walk. Once you do it, you're glad you did it. So I can definitely vouch for holistic living and vouch for what we're doing at Willow and Stone. I'm obviously a big believer in it. We're fairly new in building our brand, and it's all about holistic wellness. So if you'd like to work with me as your therapist, you can go through Willow and Stone, or you can also look into groups. We do have groups that we offer as well. Everything's still coming together, but we are offering some services, and we have other therapists as well who are highly qualified to talk about these things. You mentioned hypnosis. How does it affect the nervous system? Yeah, it's a great question. So hypnosis is kind of a misunderstood word. A lot of it is very similar to like guided meditations. I mean, guided meditations are really like just a guided hypnosis. I'm plugging in my phone. So it's really not that different. And it's affecting your nervous system because our nervous system responds to sound a lot. So I've talked about this a little bit in some videos about like sound pollution and how much it affects me. And I've always lived in noisy environments until now, which I live in a little bit more rural area. But noise pollution has a really strong impact on our nervous system and making us feel tense and uneasy. So using various sounds like binaural beats, for instance, which I can do a whole video on binaural beats, and I'm sure I will at some point, but using different tones, because you've got your delta brainwave, which is like your really slow moving sleep-like brain waves. And then you've got your theta, which is one up from that, which is more like your dream state brain waves. And then alpha is more your general alertness, a little bit faster. And then you've got beta, which is above that, a little bit more alert and aware, and maybe hypervigilant. And then gamma is the ones that are really fast that most of us don't have very often, that represent maybe big moments of realization or big life experiences or pleasures and things like that. So sound can induce you into those brainwave states by the hertz levels mimicking the brainwave frequency. So with binaural beats, if you're wearing headphones, the way that they work is they'll play two different tones, one in one ear and one in another, and your brain will integrate that into a single tone, and it'll sort of induce you into that state of consciousness that's represented by that brainwave. So sound is really powerful as a hypnotic tool. And our ancient ancestors knew this, Drumming is incredibly hypnotic. I posted a video a little earlier about, or with the drum beat, but drumming is very hypnotic, and it's often used in shamanic communities and various indigenous cultures, as well as things like Tibetan bowls and the didgeridoo in Australia, and many, many other instruments, Native American flute. A lot of music historically has been used in ceremony, not haphazardly or lightly. Sound and music has historically been used for very important ceremonial reasons or celebration, which is very hypnotic, most of it. I mean, if you're dancing at a club, you're typically in a hypnotic trance to one extent or another. Sorry, I'm getting a message on my screen. Drag this puzzle piece into place. I've never done this before, so I'm trying to get this off the screen. Okay, it's trying to have me verify my identity. So yeah, I don't know if I think that answers your question, but if you have any follow-up questions, please put them in here. But yeah, I mean, music is highly entrancing by nature, and our nervous system responds very strongly to sound. I think that's a brief explanation, but I could go into a whole sound therapy group too, or sound therapy live feed. So the groups that we have right now, thank you for asking. We have 2 groups that are in production that are going to be launched here soon. Is the neuroscience of addiction, and then the neuroscience of the nervous system and PTSD. And there's a lot that goes into those, and also mindfulness. So the neuroscience of addiction and PTSD, and also the neuroscience of mindfulness. And go into a lot of depth, 4-part group series that goes into a lot of depth on those topics, and not just the science and the data and the history and all that, but also practical ways to use the information. How do you apply it in ways that are going to benefit you holistically? So we're again in this building process, but if you're interested in those groups, you can also find them on our website, Willow and Stone Wellness Collective. And we can post that in the chat, and you can find that on my page, and you can find that at Willow and Stone's page. And yeah, please do inquire, because I'll be running those groups here as we have enough interest and people joining the groups, because again, this is all fairly new, but I have a lot of experience in those topics and many other topics. I've run hundreds, if not thousands, of groups on topics like that and others in addiction rehab and psychiatric settings. But yeah, thanks for asking. I took a class on mindfulness, what it does in the brain. And so, yes, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Totally fascinating. The neuroscience of mindfulness is super fascinating, and it's an incredible, almost like a superpower, mindfulness and meditation, and how it impacts the neurology and the neuroplasticity of our brains, how our brains are malleable. They're not a piece of rock like this stone. They're moldable, and mindfulness and meditation are kind of like a brain hack. And that's why a lot of people who meditate regularly are pretty calm, pretty easygoing for the most part, more open and broad perspectives on things, less ruminating about day-to-day things, more introspective usually and self-aware, stuff like that. And there's all kinds of benefits to it. I mean, pain management. It helps with pain tolerance. It's all kinds of things. And it can be measured in brain waves too. Brainwave activity, mindfulness and meditation. So there's all kinds of videos about that too. And I can, in those groups, give you guys links to videos and things you can look at outside of the groups, handouts, stuff where you have tangible resources as well. And yeah, you can join the groups through our website, Willow and Stone Wellness Collective. I'm trying to say the exact, I don't want to get the website totally wrong as far as exactly how it's said in the URL, because that would be embarrassing. But I know it's Willow and Stone Wellness Collective. And if Willow and Stone can put the link here in the chat, thank you. WillowStoneCollective.com. I appreciate it. I knew it wasn't the whole name. WillowStoneCollective.com. You can sign up for our groups, and also if you submit your interest through there, our our team will get back to you. Like if you want to work with me, for instance, as your therapist or another one of our therapists, you'll have an opportunity to speak with us also in a consultation to see if it's the right fit. It's holistically based, and it's we're not affiliated with anyone in that sense, and so that's what makes what we're doing unique. So you'll learn more about that through consulting with us and what you're looking for and if it's the right fit. And that's for one-on-ones. And then groups, we can also answer questions through the chat, or we have people reach out and answer questions if needed too. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to host groups. It'll be online groups, of course, at first. I'm in the Sacramento area, so we hope over time to have more stuff in person too. But we have providers across California, but it's a small number of us because we're trying to hold to a certain holistic wellness standard. So we are selected in that regard to represent the company. But no, I'm very excited to get started with groups too. It's definitely a passion of mine to talk about these things. Yes, the consultation is free, and there's no obligation, as you hear in commercials. It's just to get to know the provider and what it is you're looking for. And I'm not a salesperson, as you can probably tell. And I don't care enough to give you a sales pitch. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. But if it's something that you feel you would benefit from and you're interested, myself or other providers can talk to you about our backgrounds and what we can and can't help with, and the types of things that interest you. But yeah, I'd obviously love to meet any of you guys that way, and if I can be of service as your therapist, that'd be great. I'm very open to helping however I can, supporting people. I have my own therapist, I have my own mentors. I don't have it all figured out. I don't act like I do. So just to keep that all in mind, that you're going to be in good hands with any of us. But yeah, I've got to wrap up here in a couple of minutes because I actually do have to meet with a client in a session coming up. But maybe if a couple more minutes here, maybe one last question. Yes, we are based and licensed in California. So all California therapists and California clients. Maybe one last question, and then we can wrap up for now. But thank you guys for all joining. I really appreciate it. And this is my first time ever doing this. So I appreciate you guys being a part of it. And your questions and your comments, and they mean a lot. Yeah, I'm still building my own brand and also confidence doing this. So I appreciate all the support. Yes. For more support and questions, you can follow us on Instagram, YouTube. You can follow mine as well. And yeah, we have a TikTok account, of course. We have a LinkedIn account, Facebook account. So however you want to find us, please do. But yeah, we'll actually wrap up here. So I don't see any other questions popping up. But thank you guys all for joining. And we'll be trying to do this once a week, probably on Fridays around this time, but we're still figuring out some of those details. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Mev7011, thank you for the shout out and for your inquiry. And I'm excited to have you as part of the group too. Looking forward to getting to know you guys. And part of the groups too is for all of us to have a discussion. So the groups aren't just about me, teaching in front of a whiteboard. It's also going to be having conversations about these things too, so we can all learn and grow from each other. That's how I typically like to facilitate groups, where it's not just, telling you everything, because I also want to empower everybody to talk about their own life experience and their own thoughts about things and discuss them, because that's what can really help spark ideas and further conversations. But I'm really excited to have you a part of one of my groups coming up, and whoever else would like to join. And I really appreciate the support. And yeah, on behalf of Willow and Stone, thank you guys. I'll see you later.